Don't touch that glass. Claire Donovan's voice cut through the elegant dining room, a heartbeat too late. Dominic Reyes, the city's most feared mafia boss, had already taken a sip. For one brief second, nothing happened. Then the crystal wine glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered across the marble floor as his body collapsed beside it. 30 armed bodyguards drew their weapons in perfect unison. Every gun was aimed at the plus-size waitress who had served the wine. Claire didn't scream. She didn't run. She reached for the half-empty glass, lifted it without hesitation, and drank every remaining drop. The room fell silent. "If you think I poisoned him," she said, struggling to stay on her feet, "test my blood. When we're both dying from the same poison, maybe you'll finally stop accusing the wrong person." Her vision blurred. Her knees gave way. Just before she hit the floor, a strong hand caught her wrist. Dominic's eyes opened for only a second. 3 days later, the most powerful man in the city was standing inside her tiny diner kitchen, wearing a borrowed apron and holding a job application. The annual charity gala at the Grand Meridian Hotel had been planned down to the smallest detail. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft golden light across the ballroom, while a string quartet played quietly in the background. Politicians, celebrities, business executives, and a handful of men whose wealth came from less respectable places filled the room with polished smiles and expensive conversations. Claire Donovan moved carefully between the tables, balancing a silver tray with practiced confidence. She had worked at the hotel for 2 years, long enough to know that tonight's guest list included people who could buy the building or make it disappear. She preferred not to think about which category Dominic Reyes belonged to. The famous mafia boss sat at the center table, surrounded by nearly 30 bodyguards. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He spoke little, watched everything, and somehow made the entire ballroom feel smaller simply by being there. Claire wasn't interested in powerful men. Power usually came with arrogance, and judging by the expression on Dominic's face, he had plenty of both. She approached the table with a fresh bottle of imported red wine. One bodyguard inspected the label, another uncorked the bottle. A third poured a small amount into a tasting glass before nodding his approval. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Almost. As Claire reached for Dominic's crystal glass, something unusual caught her attention. A faint scent bitter almond so light that almost anyone would have missed it. Almost her years studying food science before leaving college to care for her sick mother had trained her senses differently. She had spent countless hours identifying chemical compounds by smell alone. Wine wasn't supposed to smell like this. She looked closer. Tiny bubbles clung to the inside of the glass instead of disappearing naturally. Not many, just enough to make her stomach tighten. Someone had tampered with the wine after it had been poured. "Sir," she opened her mouth. But at that exact moment, Dominic lifted the glass. "Don't touch that glass." Every head in the ballroom turned toward her. Dominic frowned, confused by the sudden warning. Then he took a sip anyway. The silence lasted less than 3 seconds. His breathing became uneven. The glass slipped from his fingers and exploded against the marble floor. He collapsed. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Weapons appeared from every direction. Before Claire could react, 2 bodyguards slammed her onto the nearest table. Her wrists were twisted painfully behind her back. "She poisoned the boss." "I didn't," Claire shouted. "Listen to me." "The wine." A cold pistol pressed against the side of her head. "You served it." "I also tried to stop him." No one poisons the boss and walks away. Across the room, hotel staff scattered in panic. Some guests rushed toward the exits. Others pulled out their phones before security forced them to stop recording. Then another voice broke through the confusion. "Dominic!" Vanessa Cole pushed through the crowd, tears already streaming down her face. She dropped beside Dominic's unconscious body, grabbing his hand dramatically. "Oh my God! Somebody help him!" Her eyes lifted toward Claire, filled with outrage. "That woman did this." Several bodyguards tightened their grip immediately. Claire stared at Vanessa. Something about her reaction felt rehearsed. Too perfect. Too fast. Before Claire could think further, another betrayal arrived. The restaurant manager stepped forward with shaking hands. I don't know her." Claire turned toward him in disbelief. "What?" "I've never seen this woman before." Her heart stopped. "You hired me 2 years ago." "I think she's lying," the manager stammered, refusing to meet her eyes. We use temporary staff all the time. Claire suddenly understood. He wasn't protecting the truth. He was protecting himself. If the hotel admitted that one of its employees had served poisoned wine to one of the most dangerous men in America, the business would be finished. She was being sacrificed. Bodyguards were already gathering the broken glass. Another security officer reached for the bottle. Evidence. They were about to destroy it, whether intentionally or not. The only proof of what had happened would disappear within minutes. Claire's mind raced. If the poison couldn't be identified, everyone would believe she had acted alone. Then the doctors might treat Dominic for the wrong toxin. She made her decision in less than a second. With a sudden twist, she pulled free just enough to grab the remaining wine from the table. "What are you doing?" someone shouted. She raised the glass and drank every last drop. The room froze. A bodyguard ripped the empty glass from her hand. "You idiot!" Claire coughed violently before forcing herself to speak. "If I poisoned him," she struggled to breathe, "then I just became the dumbest murderer in America." Every face around her changed. No poisoner would willingly drink the same poison. "Test my blood," she whispered. "When we both show the same symptoms, you'll know he was poisoned too." Her knees buckled. Darkness crept into the edge of her vision. As she fell beside Dominic, she heard distant voices shouting for ambulances. Then a hand wrapped weakly around her wrist. She opened her eyes just enough to see Dominic looking at her. Barely conscious, barely breathing, yet somehow focused entirely on her face. Before she could say another word, everything went black. When Claire opened her eyes again, the steady beeping of hospital monitors replaced the chaos of the ballroom. Her throat burned. Every muscle in her body ached. A doctor noticed she was awake. "You were lucky," he said quietly. "The toxicology report confirmed both you and Mr. Reyes were exposed to the exact same delayed-acting poison." Claire closed her eyes in relief. She had been right. The doctors had identified the toxin before it was too late. The evidence had survived. Across the hallway, Dominic regained consciousness nearly an hour before she did, ignoring every question from his security team. He looked directly at his physician, the waitress. The doctor blinked. "What about her?" Dominic's voice was weak, but unmistakably firm. "Is she alive?" The physician nodded. "Yes." Only then did Dominic close his eyes again. 3 hours later, he insisted on meeting Claire. She expected questions. Instead, he offered gratitude, then money. She refused. He offered personal security. She refused again. Finally, he offered her a position at his private estate. Claire looked at him for a long moment before shaking her head. "You were poisoned at a dinner surrounded by 30 bodyguards," she said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reyes, but your workplace doesn't have a very convincing safety record." For the first time in years, Dominic Reyes almost smiled. 3 days later, Claire Donovan returned to work. Not because she felt completely recovered, not because her body had stopped aching, but because missing another shift meant missing another paycheck, and Bills had never cared whether someone had almost died. The neighborhood diner looked exactly as it always had. The faded red sign flickered above the entrance. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifted onto the sidewalk. Old regulars argued about baseball at the counter while the morning cook yelled at someone for burning toast. For the first time since the gala, Claire allowed herself to believe life might finally become normal again. That hope lasted exactly 3 seconds. She pushed open the kitchen door and froze. Standing beside the industrial sink was Dominic Reyes. The most feared man in the city wore a blue apron that was obviously too small for him. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. His expensive dress shoes had somehow survived a puddle of soapy water. In one hand, he held a clipboard. In the other, a job application. Claire blinked twice. "No." Dominic looked up. "Good morning." "No, I haven't even said anything yet." "You don't need to." She turned toward the diner owner, Walter Higgins, the 62-year-old owner. Smiled nervously. "Funny story." "No." He asked if we were hiring. "No. I kind of hired him." "No." Walter spread his hands helplessly. He insisted on starting at minimum wage. Claire stared at him. "Do you have any idea who he is?" Walter looked at Dominic. "He says he's an import and export." Claire slowly turned back toward Dominic. You own 7 luxury hotels. Actually, Dominic replied calmly, I own 7 now. She folded her arms. That doesn't make this conversation sound any less ridiculous. A tiny smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I needed a job. You needed therapy. Walter quietly slipped out of the kitchen before either of them could stop him. The moment they were alone, Claire lowered her voice. What are you doing here? I'm working. No, I'm applying to work. No, I'm protecting the only witness who noticed something my entire security team missed. That answer finally erased the humor from her face. She sighed. You should have started with that. Dominic leaned against the stainless steel counter. You told investigators you remembered something. I remembered very little, but something. There was a waiter I had never seen before, and there was also a guest. What about the guest? Claire hesitated. He kept touching his left wrist. Dominic frowned, touching his own wrist. Every time he answered someone's question, she looked at him. I studied people while working tables. You notice habits. When customers lie about allergies, they touch their face. When couples are about to break up, they stop looking at each other. When someone is nervous, she paused. They repeat tiny movements without realizing it. And this man, he touched his left wrist every single time he lied. Dominic memorized every word. My investigators found nothing useful. They're looking at fingerprints. I'm remembering behavior. Silence settled between them. Finally, Claire shook her head. I'm not joining your investigation. I'm not asking you to. You literally followed me to my workplace. I applied legally. You bribed my boss. I donated to his retirement fund. That's just bribery with better marketing. For the first time that morning, Dominic laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't polished. It sounded unfamiliar even to him. Claire looked genuinely surprised. So you do know how? What? Laugh. His expression returned to normal. I don't do it often. I noticed. Walter clapped his hands. All right. Orientation. He handed Dominic a stack of dirty plates. You wash. Dominic looked at the sink, then at the sponge, then back at Walter. How? The kitchen became completely silent. One cook slowly lowered his coffee mug. You've never washed dishes. I've never needed to. Walter assumed he was joking. He wasn't. Claire pinched the bridge of her nose. This is unbelievable. 20 minutes later, Dominic had somehow managed to spray soap across half the kitchen. He dropped his first plate, then another, then 4 more. Crash! Everyone stopped working. Walter stared at the broken ceramics scattered across the floor. My grandmother bought those. I'm sorry. Dominic reached into his jacket and quietly handed Walter an envelope. Walter opened it. Inside was enough cash to replace every plate in the diner at least 10 times over. Walter looked speechless. You can't do that. I already did. Claire snatched the envelope away. No. She shoved it back into Dominic's hands. You break dishes. You apologize. You don't solve every inconvenience with money. Dominic looked genuinely confused. I caused damage, so I paid for it. So you failed to see the problem. The problem, Claire replied firmly, is that people don't learn responsibility if they can always buy their way past consequences. For several seconds, Dominic said nothing. Then he quietly picked up a broom. I'll clean it. Claire watched him carefully. It was probably the first time in years that anyone had refused his money. The lunch rush arrived. Orders flew across the kitchen. Coffee cups clattered. Customers filled every booth. Claire moved effortlessly between tables, while Dominic struggled just to carry a tray without looking like it contained explosives. Then it happened. A truck driver sitting near the window whistled loudly. Hey, sweetheart! More coffee! Before Claire could answer, Dominic was already walking toward the table. His voice was calm. Too calm. If you whistle at her again, you may discover what silence feels like. The restaurant became painfully quiet. The truck driver slowly stood. What did you say? Walter nearly fainted. Claire stepped between them. Dominic. No. Dominic, he disrespected you. He asked for coffee. He whistled. I've survived worse. I haven't. She sighed deeply. Go apologize. Dominic stared at her. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I threatened him. Exactly. A long pause followed. Then, to everyone's absolute disbelief, Dominic turned toward the truck driver. I'm sorry. The man folded his arms. Didn't sound sincere. From behind him, Claire called out, Try again. Dominic closed his eyes for one brief moment, then looked directly at the customer. I sincerely apologize for suggesting you might disappear. The truck driver blinked, then burst into laughter. So that's your apology? It's the best one I've ever given. The entire diner erupted with laughter. Even Claire couldn't stop smiling. Closing time finally arrived. The exhausted staff locked the doors and headed home. Claire returned to the storage room to grab her coat. She stopped. Dominic stood beside the office desk. An envelope rested on top of a folder. What is that? Nothing. She picked it up before he could stop her. Inside was a hospital receipt, paid in full. Her smile vanished instantly. You paid my medical bill. It seemed appropriate. She shoved the envelope against his chest. I don't want it. You earned it. No, you saved my life. I didn't send you an invoice. You shouldn't have one. She forced the envelope back into his hands. You can't buy your way into my life because you feel guilty. Dominic looked directly into her eyes. I'm not trying to buy my way in. Then what are you trying to do? For the first time since they'd met, the answer came without hesitation. I'm trying to earn an invitation. Claire's heartbeat slowed. She searched his face for manipulation, for calculation, for the cold strategist everyone feared. Instead, she saw a man who genuinely didn't know how to express gratitude without money or affection without persistence. She looked away first. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't staying because he owed her. Maybe he simply wanted another reason to see her tomorrow. And that possibility frightened her far more than the poison ever had. A week passed, then another. To everyone's surprise, Dominic Reyes was still working at the diner. Officially, he was the part-time dishwasher. Unofficially, he remained the worst dishwasher Walter Higgins had ever hired. He had improved enough to stop breaking plates. Unfortunately, he had started breaking the dishwasher instead. You put dish soap in the industrial machine. Claire stared at the mountain of foam pouring across the kitchen floor. Dominic looked at the instruction panel. It didn't specifically say not to. It also doesn't specifically tell you not to wash your phone in the coffee maker. I've never done that. You thought about it, didn't you? Maybe. The cooks burst into laughter. Even Walter had stopped questioning why one of the richest men in America insisted on earning minimum wage. Somehow Dominic had become part of the family, not because of his money, because he kept showing up every single morning. The investigation had almost disappeared from their conversations. Almost. Dominic never pressured Claire for more information. He simply stayed close. Sometimes they talked while preparing vegetables before opening. Sometimes they argued over whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Sometimes they spent 10 quiet minutes drinking coffee before the first customer arrived. Those quiet moments became Claire's favorite part of the day. She refused to admit it, even to herself. One rainy afternoon, Dominic walked into the diner carrying 2 paper cups. I brought coffee. Claire accepted one. She took a sip, immediately made a face. What? This is terrible. I ordered exactly what the cashier recommended. You ordered 6 shots of espresso. I thought that sounded efficient. You made coffee that could wake people from a coma. I'll remember that. You say that every time. I do remember. You just remember the wrong lessons. For reasons neither of them could explain, conversations like this had become effortless. Dominic insisted on learning every job inside the diner. He learned to wipe tables, he learned to refill ketchup bottles, he even tried taking customer orders. That experiment lasted exactly 11 minutes. Table 7 ordered 1 pancake and 7 coffees. What arrived was 17 pancakes. The family looked horrified. We ordered 1 pancake and 7 coffees. Dominic stared at his notepad. His handwriting looked like ancient symbols. Walter gently removed the order pad from his hands. I think we'll keep you near the sink. A few days later, Claire stepped outside during her lunch break. She found Dominic sitting on the curb beside a little boy whose bicycle chain had fallen off. The child looked close to tears. Without saying a word, Dominic rolled up his sleeves. His expensive shirt became covered in grease as he carefully repaired the chain. "There," he said, spinning the wheel. "Try now." The boy smiled. "It works." He rode away laughing. Dominic wiped his hands with a paper towel and quietly stood. He never noticed Claire watching from inside the doorway. He hadn't done it to impress her. He genuinely thought nobody was looking. That realization stayed with Claire for the rest of the day. Dominic had his own unexpected discovery. One evening after closing, he returned to grab the keys he had forgotten. The dining room lights were already off. Only the kitchen remained lit. He stopped when he saw Claire packing several containers of leftover food. She looked around to make sure nobody was watching. Then she quietly walked outside. Curious, Dominic followed from a distance. Half a block away sat an elderly former waitress named Martha, who had retired after developing severe arthritis. Without saying a word, Claire handed her the food. "I made your favorite soup." "You've already done too much for me." "No, I just made too much soup." They both knew that wasn't true. Claire stayed only 5 minutes before returning to the diner. She never mentioned it to anyone. Dominic watched silently. For years, he had donated millions through foundations and charities. Yet somehow, watching Claire help one person without expecting recognition felt far more meaningful. The following Friday afternoon, the diner door opened. Every conversation inside stopped. Vanessa Cole had arrived. She wore a perfectly tailored white suit and designer sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. She looked completely out of place among truck drivers, construction workers, and exhausted nurses finishing their shifts. Her smile disappeared the moment she spotted Claire. "So," she slowly removed her sunglasses. "You're the famous waitress." Claire placed a coffee pot on the counter. "Can I get you something?" "I already have." Vanessa looked around the diner with obvious disgust. "I've been wondering what kind of woman drinks poison for attention." The room became silent. Several customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Claire calmly wiped the counter. "If I wanted attention," she smiled politely, "I'd probably choose something less painful than attempted murder." A truck driver at the back laughed first. Then another customer joined in. Within seconds, half the diner was laughing. Vanessa's smile cracked. She stepped closer. "You drank exactly half a glass." Claire's expression changed instantly. "What?" "The doctor said you were lucky. It was only half a glass." Silence. Vanessa blinked. Too late. Claire slowly set the towel down. "How do you know how much I drank?" Vanessa hesitated. "It was on the news." "No, it wasn't. The police never released that detail." For the first time, Vanessa looked genuinely uncomfortable. She recovered quickly. "I don't have time for this." She turned and walked out. But the damage had already been done. That evening, Claire met Dominic after closing. "I think Vanessa made a mistake." He listened carefully as she repeated every word. When she finished, Dominic's expression darkened. "I'm confronting her tonight." "No," she slipped. "Exactly. If you confront her now, she'll know we're suspicious." Dominic folded his arms. "So I should do nothing. You should pretend nothing happened." "I don't like pretending." "I noticed. My face isn't built for subtlety." Claire couldn't help smiling. "No, it really isn't." He sighed. "So, what's your plan?" "We let her believe I remember nothing, and then we wait for her to make another mistake." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. "That's dangerous." "So was drinking poison. You don't have to keep risking yourself." "I know, but someone has to finish this." 3 days later, Dominic received an invitation. His family's annual foundation gala. Attendance was mandatory. Vanessa would be there. So would nearly every executive connected to his organization. Claire studied the invitation. "I need to be there." "No, it's the perfect opportunity. It's the perfect place for someone to hurt you. They won't even notice me." "I'll notice." She looked up. "I'm just a waitress." His answer came without hesitation. "No, you've never been just anything." The words caught her completely off guard. For the first time since they met, Claire didn't have a clever response. She simply looked at him, and for a brief moment, the noisy little diner around them disappeared. Dominic finally broke the silence. "I don't want you there because I need a witness." I want you there because I trust you. Claire slowly exhaled, then gave the smallest nod. Okay. Neither of them realized it yet, but the next glass of wine would change both of their lives forever. The Reyes Foundation Gala was unlike anything Claire had ever experienced. A century-old mansion overlooked the city skyline, its marble balconies glowing beneath thousands of golden lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, while photographers captured every famous face stepping onto the red carpet. Claire adjusted the black catering uniform she had borrowed for the evening. She felt invisible, exactly as planned. Dominic had arranged for her to work with the catering staff instead of attending as his guest. It was the safest way to let her observe the room without attracting unnecessary attention. At least, that had been the plan. The moment Vanessa Cole entered the ballroom, her eyes immediately found Claire. A slow smile spread across her face. "So," Vanessa said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "they've hired heroes as waitresses now." Several people chuckled politely. Claire continued placing champagne glasses on a serving tray without looking up. "I'm just here to do my job." "Oh." Vanessa stepped closer. "I thought your job was drinking poison." A few uncomfortable laughs echoed through the room. Claire finally met her eyes. "My doctor strongly recommended I retire from that profession." Several guests smiled. Vanessa didn't. She hated losing control of her room. From across the ballroom, Dominic watched the exchange carefully. His instinct told him to walk over to end the conversation, to remove Claire from Vanessa's reach. Then Claire looked toward him, almost imperceptibly. She shook her head. "Not yet. Trust me." Dominic remained where he was. Every muscle in his body protested the decision. An hour later, dinner was served. The orchestra played softly, while guests discussed politics, investments, and charity projects. Claire moved quietly between tables, observing everything. She wasn't searching for fingerprints or hidden weapons. She was watching people, watching habits, watching reactions the same way she had watched customers for years. Then she noticed him. Marcus Wren, Dominic's longtime financial advisor, calm, polished, perfectly composed. Every answer he gave sounded rehearsed, and each time someone questioned him, his right hand drifted toward his left wrist. Just one light touch, exactly as before. Claire's heartbeat quickened. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not again. Before she could warn Dominic, Vanessa suddenly lifted a crystal wine glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with a charming smile, "I'd like to celebrate courage." The room quieted. She turned toward Claire. "Everyone has heard the story. The brave waitress who drank poisoned wine." More guests looked toward Claire, some curious, some skeptical. Vanessa walked toward her, carrying a fresh glass of red wine. "If you're truly as fearless as everyone claims," she extended the glass, "drink this one too." The ballroom became completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every camera turned. Dominic stood instantly. "Vanessa." She ignored him. "What happened? Afraid this time?" She smiled sweetly at Claire. Several guests shifted awkwardly. The challenge wasn't about wine. It was about humiliation. If Claire refused, Vanessa would paint her as a fraud. If she accepted, nobody could guarantee the glass was safe. Claire looked at the wine, then at Vanessa. Then she smiled. Without drinking a single drop, she gently offered the glass back. "You first." Vanessa blinked. "What?" "You seem very confident it's safe." Claire held the glass a little closer. "You first." A long silence followed. Vanessa didn't move. "I don't need to prove anything." Claire tilted her head. "That's strange. Last time, you seemed awfully certain which glass was safe." The color drained from Vanessa's face. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Across the room, Marcus Wren instinctively rubbed his left wrist. One quick movement, barely noticeable, except Claire saw it. Exactly the same gesture, exactly the same nervous habit, exactly the same movement burned into her memory from the night Dominic collapsed. She slowly turned toward him. "It's him." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Dominic looked from Claire to Marcus, then to the hand resting against the man's left wrist. Marcus immediately recovered. "This is absurd. She's inventing stories." Vanessa quickly stepped forward. "She's desperate for attention." Several guests looked uncertain. Without physical evidence, it was one person's memory against another's reputation. Marcus forced a confident laugh. Are we really accusing people because they touched their wrist? Some guests nodded. It sounded ridiculous. Claire remained perfectly calm. No, she answered softly. I'm accusing you because it's the same unconscious habit you had while lying during the charity gala. Marcus's smile faded for the first time all evening. He looked nervous. Dominic raised one hand. The ballroom fell silent. I believe it's time. He looked toward the head of security. Please begin. The lights dimmed. A massive screen descended behind the stage. Video footage appeared, security recordings, hotel surveillance, financial reports, phone records, bank transfers. Weeks earlier, while pretending to abandon the investigation, Dominic had secretly ordered a complete forensic audit of every executive with access to his organization. Marcus's accounts revealed millions of dollars quietly redirected into shell companies. Surveillance footage showed an unidentified waiter switching wine glasses moments before dinner. Another camera captured Marcus meeting privately with that same waiter hours before the event. The final document displayed dozens of encrypted payments connected to Vanessa. Gasps spread through the ballroom. Someone whispered, "My God." Marcus took one step backward, then another. Vanessa looked around desperately. Every escape route was blocked. You set me up, Vanessa whispered. Dominic looked at her quietly. No, you did that yourself. She laughed bitterly. You're throwing away your future. Her eyes shifted toward Claire. For a fat waitress? The insult echoed through the silent ballroom. No one laughed. No one agreed. Dominic walked slowly toward Claire. He didn't rush. He didn't make a dramatic speech. He simply stopped beside her, close enough that everyone understood exactly where he had chosen to stand. Then he looked directly at Vanessa. I'm not destroying my future. He gently took Claire's hand. I'm finally recognizing who deserves to be part of it. The room fell completely silent. No applause, no whispers, just silence, because everyone understood what those words meant. Security officers escorted Marcus away. Vanessa tried one final time. You can't seriously trust her over me, Dominic answered without looking away from Claire. She saved my life. When everyone else accused her, she risked dying to prove I was worth saving. He finally faced the crowd. Claire Donovan didn't just expose the people who betrayed me. She stopped me from becoming someone ruled by anger. If she hadn't acted that night, I would have executed an innocent woman with my own ignorance. Every guest lowered their eyes. The woman many had dismissed as an ordinary plus-size waitress now stood at the center of the ballroom, not because of wealth, beauty, or influence, but because of courage. As Vanessa was led away, she looked back one last time. She expected satisfaction on Claire's face. Instead, she found compassion. Claire simply whispered, I hope one day you stop trying to become someone else by destroying everyone around you. Vanessa said nothing. For the first time in years, she had no words left. Dominic looked at Claire. So, are you ready to leave? She smiled. Only if there isn't any wine involved. For the first time that night, he laughed without hesitation, and everyone in the ballroom realized the most powerful man in the city had changed in a way no one thought possible. The headlines lasted for nearly 2 weeks. Mafia Boss exposes billion-dollar conspiracy. Charity gala poison plot finally solved. Waitress cleared after risking her life to save powerful businessmen. News stations replayed the surveillance footage over and over again. Commentators debated the scandal. Social media celebrated Claire as an unlikely hero. She hated every second of it. The attention wasn't what bothered her. It was the assumption that everything had suddenly become easy. It hadn't. She still woke up from nightmares where Dominic collapsed in front of her. She still smelled bitter almonds whenever she opened a bottle of red wine. And every time someone called her the brave waitress, she remembered how terrified she had actually been. Life slowly returned to normal. Or, at least as normal as it could. Marcus Wren and Vanessa Cole were formally charged for conspiracy, attempted murder, financial fraud, and multiple related crimes. The Reyes organization survived the scandal not because Dominic tightened his grip through fear, but because for the first time he chose transparency over intimidation. Executives who had spent years obeying him out of fear now began respecting him instead. The transformation surprised everyone, especially Dominic himself. Claire returned to the diner for a few more weeks. Then, one morning, she placed an envelope on Walter Higgins's desk. "I found another path." Walter looked at the letter. A university acceptance notice. She had been readmitted into the food science program she had abandoned years earlier to care for her mother. "I always knew you'd go back," Walter said softly. "I just didn't know when." Claire smiled. "I didn't either." "What changed?" She looked through the kitchen window. Outside, Dominic was unsuccessfully trying to teach himself how to parallel park without frightening pedestrians. She laughed quietly. "I remembered that surviving isn't the same as living." Walter nodded. "You'll always have a job here." "I know. That's why it's so hard to leave." Dominic offered to pay every dollar of her tuition. She refused before he even finished the sentence. "I expected that," he admitted. "So why ask?" "Because 6 months ago, I would have assumed money solved every problem. And now? Now I know it only solves the problems money actually created." She smiled. "You're learning." "I'm trying." Instead of paying her tuition, Dominic spent several days researching scholarship programs. He found one specifically created for students returning to complete interrupted degrees. He never submitted the application. He simply placed the information on her kitchen table. "The rest is yours." Claire looked at him. "You really aren't trying to rescue me anymore." He shook his head. "You never needed rescuing. You just deserved opportunities no one gave you." Months later, Claire earned the scholarship entirely on her own. It became one of the proudest moments of her life, not because someone powerful had opened the door, but because she had walked through it herself. Autumn arrived. Classes became harder. Assignments grew longer. Yet somehow, Dominic continued finding excuses to visit campus. Sometimes he claimed the coffee shop nearby served the best espresso in the city. Other times, he insisted he had business meetings in the neighborhood. Neither excuse fooled Claire anymore. One evening after class, they walked through the university gardens together. The leaves had begun turning shades of gold and crimson. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." She stopped walking. "When you first came to the diner, were you chasing me because I saved your life?" Dominic looked thoughtful. "No," she smiled. "I don't believe you." "It's true." "Then was it because I recognized the traitor?" Again, he shook his head. "No." She folded her arms. "All right, I'm officially confused. If it wasn't the poison, and it wasn't the investigation, why?" Dominic reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He carefully unfolded a small piece of paper. It looked old. The edges were worn. "You remember this?" She frowned. "It's a hospital receipt." "Turn it over." Claire slowly flipped it over. Her own handwriting covered the back. Uneven. Messy. Barely legible. She stared at it. "I don't remember writing this." "You were heavily sedated." The note read, "If the arrogant man in the next room wakes up first, don't let him fire anyone. He doesn't make good decisions when he's hungry." Claire covered her face. "Oh no, I actually wrote that." "You did." "I almost died." "You did, and that's what I was worried about." Dominic nodded. "You had poison in your bloodstream. You could barely stay conscious. You didn't know whether you'd survive." He stepped a little closer. "But instead of worrying about yourself, you worried that I'd wake up angry and punish innocent people." His voice softened. That was the moment everything changed. Claire looked at him quietly. "I wasn't trying to change you." "I know. That's exactly why you did." He took a slow breath. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who feared me or wanted something from me. You are the first person who cared more about the kind of man I could become than the power I already had." He smiled gently. "I didn't fall in love with the woman who drank poison. I fell in love with the woman who believed I could still become someone better." Claire felt tears gathering in her eyes. She laughed softly through them. "I accidentally wrote myself into a love story while drugged." "You did." "I'd like to pretend that never happened." "I'm keeping the receipt forever," she groaned dramatically. "I knew you'd say that." Several months later, Dominic invited Claire to dinner. This time, not at a luxury hotel, not at an exclusive restaurant. He chose the tiny neighborhood diner where everything had begun. Walter insisted on cooking personally. The staff secretly decorated one corner with fairy lights after closing. When the waiter arrived, he placed 2 glasses of lemonade on the table. Without thinking, Dominic quietly exchanged his glass with Claire's. She raised an eyebrow. Still worried I'll taste test your drinks? He smiled. No. So why switch them? Because a year ago you drank first to make sure I lived. He gently pushed the safer-looking glass back toward her. Tonight I drink first, so you'll never have to wonder whether yours is safe. Claire stared at him for a long moment. She couldn't speak. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. You finally learned what love isn't. It's not about one person sacrificing everything. It's about making sure neither person has to. Dominic smiled. I had a good teacher. 1 year later, Claire graduated with honors and accepted a position as a food safety specialist for a non-profit organization dedicated to helping small family-owned restaurants improve food safety standards. The ceremony took place in the same city where she had once been known only as the waitress. As she walked across the stage to receive her certificate, the audience stood and applauded, not because she had become famous, but because she had earned every step of the journey. Dominic remained in the last row, applauding louder than anyone else. He never tried to stand beside her spotlight. He simply admired it. After the ceremony, they walked through the campus together. No bodyguards, no reporters, no expensive cars, just 2 ordinary people sharing an ordinary afternoon. Claire smiled as she looked at him. You know what? I still don't trust you to pour wine. Dominic laughed. I don't trust me either. Good. She slipped her hand into his. Let's order lemonade. They walked away together beneath the warm evening sun. A waitress who refused to sell her courage. A man who learned that real strength wasn't measured by power, but by the willingness to become better for the person who believed in you before you believed in yourself. And neither of them ever forgot the lesson hidden inside a single poisoned glass. The greatest act of love is not dying for someone, it's choosing every single day to help each other live better.